Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series. My name is Constant Reader Scott Daly.
And I am Inconstant Reader Matt Freeman.
Wait, like incontinent reader? Like when all the poop comes out?
No, inconstant, like the moon.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, good.
Huh.
This week on the show, we are taking one final look back at Book 4 of The Dark Tower, Wizard and Glass. We're going to discuss its theme, what we thought of it overall, and then finish on what Matt thinks is going to happen next. And then we're going to answer a bunch of y'all's questions. This is the thing we like to do at the end of every single one of our books. If you folks listening have noticed, we stuff our episodes with a lot of content. We do like 60 to 100 pages of these books every week, and our episodes are long because there's like a shit ton of things to talk about. So we like to have these episodes at the very end of the book to just like do like a calmer episode where we're not like rushing to recover all the material. We just get to chill and look at the book from a 500-foot level. So that's what this episode is, and it's been a while, Matt. It's been a while since we've gotten to do this.
Yeah, I think it's important to do. I mean, especially because my favorite thing about this sort of episode is sitting back from the book and being like, all right, like what can we say about this book as a book? Especially when you're reading through a series, it's very easy to just get caught up in the next piece of the series. And it's like, no, there's a reason why Stephen King divided the books the way he divided them. And each of the books does have some particular thing that it's doing, which the previous book wasn't doing and the next book won't be doing. And so I think it'll be fun to nail down what Wizard and Glass was doing.
Yeah. So let's get right into it and let's do that. First, before we do that, though, I just want your overall high level start to finish impressions of the book. How was the book for you? Did you like it? I mean, I'm going to guess the answer to that is yes, considering our last 11 episodes. But how did it stack up compared to the rest of the series and compared to, what your expectations were going into it?
I think that I'd just say it was very different from anything that I was kind of prepared for, which is becoming a bit of a theme with The Dark Tower, actually, where it seems like that's almost one of the main things he's doing with this series is just these constant surprising right turns. Just when you think like you're like, okay, this is what we're doing, then suddenly the story changes again. I mean, this book started out continuing from our adventure with Blaine the Mono, and then the riddling part, which is in a sense the conclusion of the previous book in a certain sense, but of course it's also the entire beginning of this book, and that was amazing. So like just going through the book, like the Blaine the Mono stuff, I loved it. I loved the resolution of that. I loved Eddie's stupid riddle. I love that was the solution. That was beautiful. All of the stuff as they're going through Topeka. Interestingly, even at the time we commented that like there wasn't really any plot there, but that still, like, it created so many images that have really stuck in my mind. And you'll be doing something and then like a kind of a flash of an image will appear, and I keep kind of being brought back to this apocalyptic wasteland of disease and then the Thinny, them walking through the Thinny on the freeway or the turnpike or whatever, and then of course we get into the Hambry section, the midworld section, which is really the bulk of the book. And that's mainly what I mean when I say like, well, I did expect more Roland backstory, but I didn't expect a whole book of Roland backstory, and that's really what we got.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. It's so different in tone, in voice, in narrative structure, in the sorts of characters and the sorts of things that it's exploring. It's kind of like a totally different book inserted into the middle of our series. But also, of course, it's not that, because it works perfectly. It's of a piece with this series. It's of a piece of the series, and one of the things I really want to get into a little bit later is the ways in which the bookends of this story kind of tie in with the bulk of the Hambry story in general, because I do think they do. I think there's some similar theming and imagery going on here that's really fascinating. We touched on it a little bit as we went, but I think being able to see it all at the end, all coming together, I think is really wonderful. Yeah, me too. I wrestled for a long time on how much to tell you about this book, and I kind of ended up on
tell him nothing. I was wondering, like, there was so much back and forth in my head about, like, do I prep him that this is a book that is not going to advance the plot of our main quartet very much at all, that this is a book that is mostly going to take place in the past, that is mostly going to take place in a story within a story. I wrestled with that a lot. And even when we got into the Hambry story, I wrestled with the idea of, do I tell him that this is it now, that this is the rest of the book, basically? Or because I'm sure, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure you probably thought that this was, when you first jumped into the story, that, okay, we're going to do this for like a few chapters, and then we're going to jump back out, and maybe we'll go back and forth to it a few times as the quartet is making their way along the highway. But that is not what it is at all.
Yeah, that was my assumption for a while. And then at a certain point, I think once you're a significant fraction of the book done and you're still in the Hambry part, you just kind of realize, like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. This is the focus of what King wants to do with this book. And, you know, I did think we would get back to the main story, and we did. But yeah, I think, I don't know, it's so unusual, right? Like, I've read so many fantasy stories in my life, and it's not that, like, telling a story about what happened in the past is an unusual motif. I mean, the whole Kingkiller Chronicles is literally that. But the parenthetical, like we're literally just going to stop the plot that we're doing and tell this story, that is really unusual. But I was so into it the whole time, right? Like, he does such a good job introducing you to Susan and young Roland and Alan and Cuthbert so quickly and so effectively that you're just absolutely into that. And if anything, the problem with the Hambry part for me was that because we had to read it slowly because of the nature of this podcast, it had been so many weeks since we saw Eddie and Susanna and Jake that I was like sort of forgetting who they were, which probably wouldn't have been as much of a problem if I just blazed through it, right?
Sure. Yeah. I do think, and I tried to argue this last week, I do think that the opening parts of part 4 of this book, where we rejoin those characters, I can tell when I read those words that King is trying to refresh our memory, that he is trying to, like, play a quick round of catch up with us. Like, you remember Eddie, right? Eddie's the dude that did blah, 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 blah. Susanna's the one that's going to do this. Jake is the one like this. And then we have, like, he's playing a refresher game with us, I think. So yeah, I will agree with you that, like, the time between we left Eddie, the time between, like, Eddie and his silly joking, defeating Blaine, and the time we link back up with Eddie at the end of this book, for us, was 2.5 months. That's a long time. That's a long time to be away from him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because the text even reminds us of, like, one of the first things Eddie says when we're fully back into the story is that Eddie's like, haha, next time you can, you know, you can tell the evil train the jokes. And,
right.
And it's like, oh, that happened in this book.
Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, honestly, when you were going over, like, a high level, like, and then this happened and I really liked this part, and you got to the Eddie telling the silly joke part, there was a brief moment in my head that was like, wait, that was this one? that was this one? And I mean, that tends to happen to me with series that I've read multiple times and loved, right? We've talked about this before, where the events and which a book they occur in start to blend together a little bit. I think now that I'm going through this, by the time we finish this project, I think I will always in my head have a very clear idea of what happened in which book, just because we spent so much time on it. But yeah, that does tend to happen, and it was a while. But I liked it because I think when I do read this very quickly at times, there is part of me that is always, like, thinking in the background, okay, what's going on with Eddie and Jake and Susanna? I want to get back there. And it's always in the back of my head. And I read this book. The first time I read this book, I read it very quickly. It's like 890 pages or something. I read it in a week or something like that. And that's pretty fast for me. And it's because I wanted to get back. Like, it's not that I didn't love Roland's story. I did. And Wizard and Glass is my favorite book in the series. And I'll say that now. And we'll say it again when we're answering some questions later. But I was really curious about what was going to happen next in the story proper as well. And so it kind of makes you speed read. So like being forced to slow down, I think allowed me to soak in Hambry in a way that I don't think I ever have before. That I really felt a part of this town for the first time. I mean, that's something that we talked about this, but that's something that King does so well is he creates this place and he populates it with these characters. And if you spend enough time in that place, you really feel like you're there. That's what he did in Derry and It, and that's why that is an 1,100 page book. It's a very, very long book, but you spend so much time with these kids living in this town that you really feel like it's a real place. And that's what all his big doorstop novels do, I think. You get to sprawl out there. And our time constraints on it made that sprawl even more because I was spending 10, 20 hours a week talking about, reading, or thinking about this town and this story and these characters.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And while we were going through it this week, I kept thinking to myself, like, I can't wait till we're done with this project and I can just start over and then just blast through the whole thing, because I actually want that experience. Even if I already know what happens, I still want to be able to like just go through the whole thing and get that sense of how everything connects together. Like when we did our Worm podcast, Worm is a gigantic 1 million plus word mega thing. Most people read it in like a month of obsession because that's the sort of story that it is. And you had a very different experience reading through it because of the truncated nature of the way we do things. And I'm having that different experience this time, but I'm literally excited to start over and listen to the whole story again. So
well, hang on there, partner. We got a few more books to finish.
Okay,
first.
well, I can't wait. So
no, that is a fun experience, and I hope we get to finish with this, and you still have the desire to do that at the end of this experience, because it is a different way of experiencing the books for sure. I loved it. I've done that. I think the last time I did it was 5 years ago, where I pounded through them all in a couple months, something like that. And it's definitely an experience that's different from this. But so I guess that kind of one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, like we've been talking throughout these months about why is this book important to the story in general, right? Like we've mused a lot about, well, Watsonian wise, like this is Roland dealing with his past to get by it, to get past it in a way, to look back on something that he's never truly faced, to kind of purify himself, or to go back to what we talked about with Brown back in the very first book, to like give confession and be absolved of his sins in a biblical way, before to become pure before he can resume the next phase of his quest. But I kind of want to go outside that and speak and maybe speculate meta-wise, like Stephen King chose here in this moment in the middle of his series to do this. And you talked about how unusual that is in this kind of fiction. Like I think Kingkiller is basically Wizard and Glass, but the series, but they established from the very beginning that that's how it's going to work, right? That's the founding principle of that book series, is it's going to be people telling a story and then we go back in the story. This is book 4 of 7, and now we're just suddenly going to do this. And I think it's so, I don't know, like there is something so amazing about it. And when, I've been doing this Stephen King reread where I've been going through his books in chronological order from Carrie all the way up to If It Bleeds, which is his most released book of short stories. And one of the things I've really seen about King in the 90s is that he's really pushing the envelope as far as the types of stories he wants to tell and like the structural types of stories he wants to tell. I think it was early 90s. He wrote a story called Dolores Claiborne, which is literally a woman giving a confessional to a police detective, like she's confessing to a murder she committed, and it is just like her transcript of her, but it's only her side, right? Like so you don't hear You don't hear anything else. You don't hear the cops talking back to her. She just reacts to them. And it's just like if you wrote down her side of that entire conversation and put it in a book, that's what it is. And so he's experimenting with all these different ways of structuring a novel. And this seems very part and parcel of that to me, where he's like, all right, I'm going to do another Dark Tower book, but I'm not going to do it like the other Dark Tower books. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to chase this idea I had, which is to just drop a big story in the middle of a book that is picking up on a cliffhanger. Yeah,
that's really interesting. Obviously, I can't really comment to what you just said, but I mean, it does make sense to me that somebody who is just kind of this writing machine, who's been writing for, I don't know how many years he'd been writing by the time he got to this book, decades, right? Like at least 10 years of just like solid writing. You imagine that an artist like that would want to play with conventions and do some unusual things.
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, I don't know if this is speaking at a meta level or not. It's speaking at some kind of level. Just it's been sort of evident from the first book that this is a story about this protagonist who is not a great person and struggles with a huge burden of memory and guilt and obsession and just basically the past maybe is a better way, is a more simple and sort of all-encompassing way of phrasing it. A character who struggles mightily with their past. And I think that it might it might have not worked at all to just sort of be like, we're always going to obliquely talk about the fact that Roland has this troubled past, but never actually really go into it. Like I feel I haven't finished the series, so I can't say this fully, but like I wonder if once we finish the series, it would make sense to be like, there's no way the series could have worked without the Hambry thing, without the extremely lengthy backstory of Roland, because if you don't understand his past, then you don't understand him. And that's what this story is about. It's about a man who is sort of stuck in his past. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Again, this is the sort of thing where I'm interested to come back and listen to what I just said in a year and see if it makes any sense.
No, I mean, I like that. I mean, there's an argument that could be made where one could say, okay, I'll give you this, Scott and Matt. Roland's Hambry story is really important. I'll give you that. Like, it is necessary to understand Roland's past. Did we need to do it in 700 pages? Could we have told this story in less pages? And the answer to that is like probably yes, but I could also say that about literally every other Stephen King book. Like Stephen King, especially these doorstop novels like this one, likes that sprawl and he likes to explore. And I do think that on a meta level, there is a certain importance placed on this story just because of its length, right? Like if this was a couple chapters of Roland explaining, and well, there's this girl and I fell in love with her and we were so in love and I decided to shirk my duties and I was kind of love blind, and then tragedy struck, things warped around us and she ended up dead and it's haunted me my entire life. And you could tell that story in a much quicker, tighter type story, right? But I think the fact that it takes so long, the fact that Roland goes through the entire summer, goes through the courting of Susan, goes through meeting everyone, goes through understanding everything that happened in Hambry, shows that it's important, demonstrates to the reader that this is key to everything, that everything that happens here is key to understanding who Roland is and why Roland makes the choices that he makes, or sometimes even feels like he has no choice but to make the choices that he makes.
Agree with all that 100%. I mean, and also just the fact that like I just the sorts of things that we cover and the sorts of things that I like prove that I really do like these sprawling, tangent-filled stories. I mean, the fact that this is a story nominally about, you know, Roland and his trip to the Dark Tower with Eddie, Susanna, and Jake, and yet we get this like lengthy period of time where we're in the head of Jonas, who is a sort of peripheral figure from when Roland was a kid. Like, and you love it, right? You love it, and you if anything, you want more of it. You want to know more about Jonas, and like you want to know more about Reynolds. Like that's the kind of story that I like. Is the story that's willing to take you down all these little side roads, and even at the risk of maybe losing sight of the goal. But I again, like this is, I think the Dark Tower sort of is a story about stories, and so. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the point is like, look, like meandering and taking winding paths to get places. That's kind of life, actually. Life doesn't have a plot, and life isn't economical with its word count. I don't know. I have a lot of vague feelings along those lines that are difficult to substantiate. But
yeah. I mean, I think. Without getting into details, I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities to kind of revisit that idea as we go further through the series. As we're kind of reaching, it feels weird to say, like, page count wise, we are past the halfway point now. We've got 4 books left. One of them is kind of a book out of time of the rest of them, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. But like. The weird thing is, and we'll talk about this when we get to Wolves of the Calla. See, that's the one thing. I really want to say Wolves of the Calla because it's the double A, like the Spanish. Like, I really want to say that, which that's the name of the next book, by the way. It's Wolves of the Calla. I really want to say Calla because it's double Spanish, but it's not. It's not. I'm pretty sure about that. Someone will email us and tell me I'm wrong or right, but those books, you know, we'll talk about this. Like the last 3 books in the series were written, you know, fairly close to each other in time. So like the first 4 were stretched out amongst decades, and then King wraps it up pretty quickly. And so it feels like we're going to talk about this a lot in the next book, but it feels like we have finished one phase. We've approached one threshold, and at the end of Wizard and Glass, we walked this threshold, and we're going to walk into something. I don't think it's going to surprise you to hear new and different. I think that's what every one of these books has been new and different, and it's the same characters, the same journey, but it's done different things. It's focused on different things. It's explored different ideas, and in ways in which I think is very, very interesting. And I think King writes, when he knows he's sitting down to write a Dark Tower novel, he is writing differently than he writes any other of his books. It's just, this is something that is important to him on a level beyond all the other novels he's written, which is not to say that he doesn't find those novels important. Of course he does. But this is the Dark Tower. This is different. And I think that shows in how he writes and the grandeur of, you know, spending 800 pages on Roland's love affair that ended in tragedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it.
So before we go on, I just like, we talked about Greek tragedy a lot in these past few months, because this story is in essence a Greek tragedy, right? Like we have our characters, we have our character's hubris that results in disaster, and he loses everything. And I was wondering if there was any way you could see, like, is there a way to connect? Is this a specific thing of Wizard and Glass, or is this something that King is exploring in the series as a whole? And I just want to get your opinion on that.
Well, I mean, it's definitely became much more kind of obvious in this one, especially because it's a self-contained story. The Hambry story, the story of young Roland and Susan, is a sort of tragic love story. And it has, you know, clear beginning, middle, and end, clear ideas of like tempting fate, basically tempting Ka in this case, or you know, believing that fate is on your side when it's clearly not. I think is pretty classic. I mean, the story as a whole does deal with Ka as a concept, and so you could definitely say that, oh yeah, the whole story is a Greek tragedy. But I mean, I hesitate to say that because I don't yet know who lives and who dies. I don't yet know what twists and turns we go through. Like, I kind of want to believe that certain of our characters get to live happily ever after. But I don't think Stephen King is the kind of author who necessarily lets you have that desire. So I guess I'll have to hold off on whether the whole story ends up being a Greek tragedy. I will say it doesn't feel to me like this story is going to end with just like and then everyone died and it was all pointless and it was all sad and everything is pointless and meaningless. The end. So yeah,
I don't know if King is that type of nihilism.
I haven't read that much by him. Usually it seems like in his books and movies, there's usually something terrible happens, and people die and there's tragedy, but there's always like some person who survives and wins, and you can at least be happy for them.
Sure. I would like to introduce you to a book called Cujo, in which the entire movie is a mother stuck in a car with her son who has an illness and needs medicine for it. And there's a giant, scary, rabid dog outside the car. And that's all I'll say about that book.
Where could you be going with this?
Yeah. So I mean, King does well. I don't want to get into endings because it's way too premature to be talking about the end of the series yet.
Yeah,
but no, I know what you mean. I do think that the thing that shocked me the most on this reread is everyone kind of looks at, when you look at the Dark Tower, and if you are a constant reader and you are a tower head like me, I think we do this thing where we look at the first book and we kind of put that one aside and we say that first book is like way different from everything. And it is. King wrote it when he was 19 years old. It has a kind of a very different style to it, a different rhythm to it. He's writing differently. He's trying a different voice. And that all changes when we get into the Drawing of the Three, and that becomes very essential King. We talked about all this. I was surprised, however, to see how much this book reminded me of The Gunslinger versus how much of it was like The Wastelands and how much of it was like Drawing of the Three. And that might just literally be because of the setting, right? That might just literally be because we've gone back to a very like old Western setting where it's Roland in a small town or Roland on a quest or something like that. But like I feel like, and again, this is all conjecture. I don't know, but it feels like to me that King is trying to channel his younger self as he's channeling a younger version of Roland. He's trying to channel the person who wrote The Gunslinger a little bit. Like we talked about throughout the course of it, that we're making biblical references much more often. I think the language is by design a little bit more purple. I think it felt like a different book on this time through. It felt like a combination of the King that I know and the King that I saw in The Gunslinger, and I thought that was really interesting. I don't know if you agree with that or not. You have less other things to compare it to. So,
and I hadn't really thought about it until now, but I guess he's definitely channeling a kind of immaturity with young Roland, like consistently immaturity in the way he thinks, the way he speaks, the things that are important to him, and so in that sense, I'm sure that Stephen King, when he was 19 years old, was somewhat immature. I don't think we talked about this back when we did The Gunslinger, but like the publication of The Gunslinger was like far removed from him being 19 years old, right?
Correct. Yes. So, and changes were made to the story. Like he wrote the guts of the story when he was 19, but he made edits at an older age.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I was going to get at is like, because I would be kind of stunned if a 19-year-old actually wrote that entire book the way it is, just because it hangs together like really well. But
you're selling 19-year-old short. Somewhere out there's a 19-year-old listening to this podcast and is like, what the fuck, Matt?
Well, impress me. I challenge you.
Nice.
Yeah. No, I think I agree to the extent that I'm able to think of things on the fly. Sure.
Cool. All right. So one of the things I wanted to do with you, Matt, is revisit those pesky poems at the beginning of the book. I said we were going to do this, and here we are at the end, and we're going to do it, Matt. So let's refresh ourselves about what those three quotes that King put at the front of his book. The first one is a quote from Romeo and Juliet. We have Romeo saying, "Lady, by yonder blessed moon I vow that tips with silver all these fruit tree tops." Juliet says, "Oh, swear not by the inconstant moon that monthly changes in her circled orb, lest that thy love prove likewise variable." Romeo says, "What shall I swear by?" And Juliet says, "Do not swear at all, or if thou wilt, swear by thy gracious self, which is the god of my idolatry, and I'll believe thee." So, I mean, obviously the Romeo and Juliet nature of the story became very clear to us almost instantly as soon as we got into Hambry, right? But I think looking back at this quote, it is really, it comes alive to me in ways that it never has before. That last line, right? "Swear by thy gracious self, which is the god of my idolatry, and I'll believe thee." Which, I mean, that is Susan. That is Susan. Like Susan is a person who put everything into Roland, who committed herself fully to Roland and her love for Roland, and risked everything she had for it. And not to say that Roland didn't love Susan, obviously he did, but Roland is the inconstant moon.
Right. Because I mean, that's exactly what happens. Right. So just I kind of want to even close read this, right? Because so first of all, we have the element of the moon, which is far more inconstant in Hambry than it is on Earth, because you have like these, I still don't actually understand what it is, but the moon changes quite dramatically over time, apparently. Fruit tree tops, which is interesting because I'm pretty sure they actually have fruit trees in Hambry.
Yeah, it was apples, right?
Yeah, I think it was apples and possibly others, but definitely apples. So you've oranges. I think it was both. I think it was both. Yeah, but you've got this. I literally remember images of the story where we have like the fruit orchards and the demon moon up in the sky, and it's like, yeah, this is literally an image from Romeo and Juliet, or vice versa. And then swearing, she says, "Don't swear by the inconstant moon, or you might be inconstant like the moon is." And like you just said, that's exactly what happens. Romeo / Roland. The names are even kind of similar.
Roland Mio.
He is 100% all in on his Juliet until something happens, and then he's not anymore. And she remains totally steadfast, right? So
to her fault, right? Like, I wonder if there's something we can conclude here that like making another person or your love for another person the god of your idolatry is not good.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it reminds me of like the part of the story where they've just shacked up, and Roland is in that way that young people do, just sort of being like, yes, we'll get married. You'll come back to Gilead with me. You'll bear me 7 children, and we'll live in a castle. And I don't remember exactly what he says, but like it's a sort of like, in that moment, he probably believes that.
Yeah.
In that moment, he's capable of that kind of blasé optimism. But like any adult knows that that's not how anything works. He's not going to feel exactly this way later, and indeed he doesn't. It's sort of, it's interesting. I think I said this a few times as we were going through, the weeks, but I was like, I just love what a, sort of cynical take this is on young love. It's almost just a vicious takedown of the idea of like teenagers being in love and how dumb they are.
Yep. And we can say this because we were teenagers in love and we know how dumb we were.
In case that wasn't clear, I'm obviously talking about myself every time I speak this way.
Yeah. Thank God Twitter didn't exist when I was young and in love. That's all I could say.
Yeah.
I think back to sometime my AOL instant message status messages when I was feeling particularly young, in love, and angsty. Oh my God.
Yeah.
They're deleted now, thank the Lord.
Facebook didn't exist, and Open Diary has been deleted, so I'm free.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I love, like, this is, I don't do this very often, right? Whenever Stephen King likes to start his books with quotes, but he's not the only one that does that, right? A lot of authors really like to just drop like a knowing quote into the beginning of their story, and I don't usually go back after I finish the story and really sit and think about the quote. But I do think there's something absolutely valuable to this because it does kind of expose a lot of what the story was wanting to do. And that's kind of, if I'm being honest with you, the reason why I opened the show on these quotes, because I was kind of trying to say it without saying it, to push you into a certain mindset in some ways. And I think you picked up on some of it, but we've got a couple more to go through. So
yeah,
we can keep going through this.
Let's do it.
The second one is from The Wizard of Oz. It reads, "On the fourth day, to Dorothy's great joy, Oz sent for her, and when she entered the throne room, he greeted her pleasantly. 'Sit down, my dear. I think I have found a way to get you out of this country.' 'And back to Kansas?' she asked eagerly. 'Well, I'm not sure about Kansas,' said Oz, 'for I haven't the faintest notion which way it lies.'" This one's pretty obvious, right? This is literally what happened at the end of the book. They went and met the Wizard of Oz. They wanted to get home. Home was not Topeka, Kansas. And when they find themselves freed, they are not in Kansas anymore. They are back on the path to the beam, back in Midworld, and back ready to continue their quest.
Yeah, I agree. I'm reading it, trying to figure out if there's any other thing to it. But I mean, it is perfect because it's basically saying, you're not going back to Kansas. You're going. We don't even know. Okay, so what I was going to say is, sort of the conflict of the book is they left the path of the beam, and they need to get back to the path of the beam, but they don't know which way it lies.
Yeah,
and so this book is them finding the path back to.
And that path goes through Roland's past. And it is only by Roland facing, and not just Roland, but by Roland, by Susanna, by Jake, by Eddie, by Oy, by this quartet, this team as a whole, facing Roland's past, looking it in the eye, dealing with it, and saying, okay.
Yeah. And, you might even have to correct me if I'm wrong here, because this only just occurred to me. But, I have this notion that, like, the different quartet members sort of serve different purposes to Roland. And to my mind, like, one thing that Susan has done consistently ever since she became part of the story was sort of needle Roland to be like, hey, you've really got to tell us more stuff.
Susanna, you mean?
Susanna, yes,
okay.
Absolutely, Susanna.
You said Susan. It's very confusing.
It's not my fault. Yeah. Susanna's role is to constantly be prompting Roland to be like, okay, when are you going to tell us about this important thing that you're obviously keeping from us? She did that all throughout the previous book, and she did that throughout the beginning of this book. And I think that was really the impetus that pushed Roland to the point where he's like, all right. I'll tell you, I just got to process some things. And then he eventually gets around to doing it. But I don't think he would have if not for her continually prompting him. And so, and then consequently, I think, like, when they got to the Emerald City, I feel like if he hadn't already cleaned out all of his psychic baggage by telling them the story, then that situation would have gone badly. So basically, the cause and effect chain is Susan prompts him to basically perform his confession, get right with Jesus, as it were, and then be ready for this challenge in the Emerald City, which then gets them back on the path of the beam.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, we can only speculate what would have happened had they gone into the city without this. You're correct. Mm-hmm. But I definitely think like we talked about this, how none of them were fazed by anything that was shown to them or told to them, right? They were just like, okay, yeah, I know who he is. I understand, but that's fine. And the same with Roland. Like I just remember just this image is stuck in my head now of, Flag looking at each of them and saying, will you turn back? And they all say no. And then he doesn't give a shit, and he looks at Roland because Roland is the only one he cares about. Roland, what about you now? What about you? I'm threatening to expose your biggest sin, your oldest wound. I'm threatening to expose this to the people you care about the most, the people you love, the people that have shown you what love is again. What about you? And I think you're absolutely right that I don't know if he would have been able to just shrug that off and be like, no, fuck you. Had he not had this group experience of telling the story to these people and sharing this moment in his life that he is deeply, deeply ashamed of with these people. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
definitely.
Cool.
And I do like, just to get a little detail here, like that Oz greets them pleasantly. Like when she entered the throne room, he greeted her pleasantly, which is exactly the way Flag greets them. Sit down. Like, I think I found a way to get you out of this country. And it's just so in line with what Flag, with the way Flag was when he first met them. He was so cocky and confident about how this thing was going to go. It's wonderful. And I guess there is something to say, like the Wizard of Oz, we kind of touched on this last week, but I think I want to just hit it really hard here. The Wizard of Oz is kind of, in the end, a story about Dorothy realizing that the place that she wanted to be all along was the place she was already at, right? There's no place like home, right? There's no place like home. That is the big thing. There's no place like home. And at several times throughout the story, we have our old quartet, especially when they get to Topeka, they see things that look familiar. They recognize things from their home, and they are homesick. They miss home a little bit. They miss New York. They miss the New York of their time. And by the end of this book, these characters have fully realized that is not their home anymore. That when they click their heels together and say there's no place like home, they're not asking to be returned to their time. They're asking to be returned to their quest. Topeka is closer to their world than it is to Roland's. Like, even though it is an alternate version of Earth, of the world that they grew up in, it is still closer. It reminds them of that. And they want to leave Kansas. They don't want to get back to Kansas. Their goal is to leave Kansas. They want to get back to where they were before. And I think using Wizard of Oz to kind of really explore this idea of what there's no place like home means to this quartet now is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just to pick up on one small thing you said in there, like the idea that when Dorothy goes into Oz, she sees all these things that she sort of recognizes, but not quite, which is very much like when our characters are going through an alternate dimension, Kansas, and seeing all these things that they recognize, but not quite. And it's like there's sort of and you were there, sort of moment. That's fun.
Yeah, definitely. Instead of being, your old farmhand, it's a Tin Man, and just like instead of being the Kansas City Royals, it's the Kansas City. I forgot what the name of the team was now.
Yeah,
something.
Yeah, I was trying to remember the car brand names. I can't remember those either. But
it's the Spirit.
Yeah.
I'm so mad about this, and everyone that's listening now is like screaming at us, being like, "You fucking idiots!" But we've got a lot of stuff in this head. Okay, I can't remember it all. But let's move on to our last quote of the beginning of the book, and this one, as we said before, is from Child Roland to the Dark Tower Came. And it's a little bit that says, I asked one drought of earlier happier sights, ere fitly I could hope to play my part. Think first, fight afterwards, the soldier's art. One taste of the old times sets all to rights. And I think this is the one that confused you the most when we first read these quotes back at the beginning of the book. But I think if you read this now, you can kind of see what King's doing with this, right?
You think I'm smarter than I am. I mean, so basically he's saying he's remembering the past in order to steady himself for the future.
Yes.
Is my attempt to interpret this into English.
Yeah. Think first, fight afterwards, the soldier's art. One taste of the old time sets all to rights. By looking back at his past and getting one final taste of that old time will set you straight and set you right in a way that you can now journey forward. In the context of the poem, what is happening is Roland is in a particular dire part of his journey. I think he's like in a never-ending marshland or swamp where it's just like he's exhausted and tired and doesn't know where he is and is having a really difficult time. And I asked one drought of earlier happier sight. So he's using his past to gain energy to get past this particular bad hump in his journey to the Dark Tower. But here, I mean, I think it's very clever because King is taking that and turning it on its head a little bit, right? Like, it is not that Roland is using his fond memories of his past to kind of steady himself and gather himself to strike out with strength again. It's that these things were actually like a drain on him, that they were weakening him in some way. And the only way to gather his strength is to face those things, is not to wax nostalgic about his youth, but to actually face it and gain strength through overcoming it, not gain strength from it. This isn't like me remembering fond times back in high school and like saying, okay, there's going to be good times again, because remember those good times? I remember those good times. There's going to be good times again. That's not what this is at all. And I think King is taking those words and really exploring them in an interesting way and turning them around a little bit.
Yeah, right. It almost, I mean, it's not the opposite of what this passage means, but it is, he's saying in order to get past this challenge, I have to look to the past, actually. But not, again, like you said, not because the past was awesome, but because the past was awful.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so that was fun. I don't remember if there's any more quotes in the future books, but we're definitely going to do this again because I think this is really fun. So, this is how we learn poetry. We're going to do it.
All right,
Matt. I wanted to return to the color discussion, though. This is one of, I think, the most interesting things that you kind of discovered during your reading, something I never really thought about before, but you talked at length about the color pink and the color red, and you kind of put this pink love versus this red love. And I'm wondering here, now that we've gotten to the end of the book, how do you feel about that? Do you still feel good about that? Do you still feel like that holds up to where the story went by the end of the book?
Yeah, I mean, I think pink love, meaning lustful, meaning sexual, is something that the book hammered in. If anything, it reemphasized that over and over. I think if there's a part where I'm unsteady, it's I'm less certain that red love just definitely means wholesome, healthy love, like, because I mean, red is an ambiguous symbol anyway, right? Like, and also we have the rose, which is red. We don't really know what the rose is yet. I mean, it's possible the rose is sort of the tower that, is supposed to be connected to the White Tower, the Tower of Love. I don't know. I'm less sure about red, pretty sure about pink. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, there is a lot of color imagery in the story in general, right? We do have pink. We have red through the red roses, but we see a lot of other colors here. Orange is a color that the book returns to again and again. The several of the moons look orangey at several times. And then of course we have the biggest thing, which is we have all the colors of the rainbow, right? We have Maryland's rainbow, this 13 colored thing that the pink is only part of. And we don't really spend a lot of time on what those other colors are, but it is interesting. Like, if we want to start speculating like crazy, which we could do this, and I will just try to forget things I know as we speculate. But like, we have through the pink glass, we've defined this color and defined this glass, and we've connected it to sex. We've connected this. Everything about this thing seems to be sexual in nature. The way it hurts people, the way it drives lust and desire, what it feeds off of. It is youth and sex and lust. And that seems to be its whole game. And then we have these other 12, and we don't know anything about them. We really don't. But we can make assumptions about, okay, if this one is the sex ball, let's say, then maybe the other ones are different emotions or feeding off of different tendencies of humans. And then it becomes interesting because you think, okay, well, the pink one, we're told, is one of the only ones left in this world, right? And you and I have been talking about this world since the very beginning, since the Gunslinger, and talking about how the way sex is used in this world and sexual energy and the magic attached to it. And is it a big surprise to us that one of the only truly powerful magical items in this world that has survived throughout all the years is the one related to sex, is the one related to lust? It's not, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, we talked about how like sex and violence seem to be, even back in the Gunslinger, they seem to be like the sort of the sources of power for the way magic worked. I think that makes sense. I mean, there's like sacrificing something for power, sacrificing something for magic is a big trope. You kind of see it everywhere, but the prevalence of like sexual, like Roland having to have sex with the succubus demon to get, I don't even remember what exactly he was after, but
yeah, it was an oracle, so he was trying to get some information on where to go next.
I figured, it was, like that was an unusual wrinkle in the, so I think that makes sense. Like, this is a world where maybe other ways of getting power, other ways have broken down or moved on. And that's one of the few that remains. I did want to add to what I said a second ago, like, maybe pink is also just like sort of addictive obsessiveness, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's clearly some situations, maybe not so clearly, but there seem to be some situations where you have a character who, like Blaine, for example. Blaine is pink. Mm-hmm. Blaine is not a sexual being in any way, shape, or form, other than perhaps being an enormous phallus.
Oh my God.
but I mean, he is obsessed though. He is obsessed that with a thing. He is greedy. He is lustful for this one thing that he cares about, which is riddles, and also showing off that he is so smart. So yeah, I think it's a little bit broader than just sexual lust. We also have all these characters who struggle with addiction and so forth. So I think it has to do with that. I'm sort of rambling here because I'm trying to figure out, like, what are the other sort of elements that you would put into a rainbow of human emotion that are showing up in this story. And I'm sort of drawing a blank. Yeah. But it's definitely something to think about.
I mean, the problem here is just that we only have one thing to work with, right? So we can't, like, it's just speculation because we don't, like, if we had seen two of the balls and seen two of the ways in which the Maryland's glass, like, how different they were, we get little whispers about which ones do what. So I think we know enough to make a logical leap that says each of them work a little bit differently and maybe do something a little bit different, right? I think through Stephen Deschain's conversation, when he tells the kids about it, like, you can make that assumption, but we know so little about all the remaining ones because we don't even know how many there are remaining. We know that they feel that most of them are destroyed.
Yeah. And, to be quite pedantic for a second, it's interesting they call it Maryland's rainbow, but like I don't even, like, 13 colors. I mean, there's seven like main colors, and then pink is not even usually considered to be a color of the spectrum because pink is actually like red plus white. And so I'm like, okay, well, what are all these other colors? Like there's like 6 colors missing. Okay, black is one, white would be one. So then there's like 3 or 4 colors that I'm like, I have no idea what these colors are going to be, or if we're ever even going to find out what they are.
Well, I believe we know that there's blue, orange, and green for sure.
Which are the normal colors you would expect to find. But
right.
Yeah, I don't know. That was just something that always kind of nagged at me. Actually, is like 13 colors. I don't even know 13 colors.
I mean, and then of course the big one is Black 13, right? That is the big one. And we know nothing about this except that it represents the tower. And I loved that imagery of the gate, the rainbow gate with Black 13 in the middle, and every one of them you can look into and see life swimming in there, this weird looking life, but Black 13, nothing in there.
Yeah, it is very weird. And again, you're like, what is this place? Where does this come from? Mm-hmm. I don't know if we're ever going to find out, but it's awesome.
Yeah, so we will see. Maybe we'll see more of these balls in the future. Maybe they can help us kind of redefine what we think the colors mean. I think both of us are probably on the lookout for red. I mean, we've already defined via the Crimson King and his red sigil, and we've also have the red roses surrounding the tower. So like we've got a lot of important objects attached to this color, but I agree with you. It's really difficult at this point to conclude what specifically this means. Because that is interesting, right? We have the tower and the Crimson King, both being labeled with this red color. Like we have the rose. The rose is this beautiful, pure, wonderful thing that I think Jake literally just knows immediately is of the white. And then we have the Crimson King, who is that's not a good guy. Spoilers, not a good guy. So what does that mean?
And he's crimson, right?
And they're sharing that. Yeah. So what does that mean? I don't know.
Yeah. Obviously we're still meant to have some uncertainty about that.
Right.
So can't wait to see.
Wouldn't like the pure rose of the white be white?
You'd think so. I mean, but it's definitely red roses. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, red rose is so red that Roland thinks they're blood when he first sees them.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. What could it mean?
I don't know.
All right. So I wanted to do some fun with location stuff here now. I wanted to talk to you about we visit a lot of different locations in this book. We start off in a little town called Candleton. This is in the opening sections of the book. This is where we see like the ruins of a civilization as Blaine comes barreling through and basically levels the place. And then we go to Topeka, the ruins of a civilization after a super virus has come barreling through. And then we go to Magus, this kind of perfect idealized old town, like Wild West life that our characters all lived in, and by the end of it, that image is kind of destroyed, right? Like we don't really specifically know what happens to Magus after our characters leave it, but I don't think there's any doubt that it falls along with the rest of the world. And then we have the Emerald Palace, which is this giant, empty, devoid of life. There's no life in here at all. There's nothing but this spooky. I don't know. There's just something really interesting to me about these locations and how they kind of ping off each other. Like I think specifically Candleton and Topeka, when I was sitting down thinking about this book this week, like just these two cities, these two places in which there was clearly life here before, and it's all gone now. It's all gone, and our quartet kind of rushes through and leaves it all behind. This dead world in their wake.
Yeah, I mean, from the perspective of our main quartet, they see almost no one in this entire book, right? The only people they see in this book are Flag and TikTok Man. Yep. At the very end, and yeah, it's interesting because I'm like, Magus. It is a place where they go and they wipe out a huge number of people. But it's not. They don't leave it a ghost town. That would be Tull that he leaves the ghost town, but that was a while ago.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I think King does smartly here is the life and the virility of Magus really stand out in this book because it is different from every other location that our characters are traveling to. Like every other location is devoid of life, empty, or it either seems like it never had life in it at all, like the Emerald Palace, or like it is just a place where life no longer exists, like Candleton, like Topeka, like just, and then like the fullness with which people in Magus are living at the start of the summer really just kind of builds a really powerful contrast that you're like, wow, look, this is what life was like back in the days before everything got real bad, back before everything broke down. And it's kind of beautiful in a way. That is one thing that really shocked me about this read is I've always liked the story. I love the characters. I was really shocked at how much I fell in love with like the idealism of the lifestyle of the people that lived in Magus before things really started to get bad. Like this beautiful like image of what life was like for some of these people.
Right. It's like this beautiful harbor town. You imagine it being like drawn in pastels. It's absolutely striking compared to really anything else. Right. Like the whole. Well, okay, not. You're right. Like kind of as you flip through the settings that we have been in throughout this story, they're either like broken down concrete jungle New York City, or desert wasteland, or deserted beach with foreboding mountains on one side and monsters on the other. Like there have been really very few parts of the book where they're like, and then they were in a nice area. There was the period when they were walking through the wilderness on their way to Lud. That's about all I can think of.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the thing that's cool about this is, I was just speaking of Hambry and Magus as this beautiful ideal place, but there is obviously rot at the core of it, right? There's rot in the corruption that's happening here. There's rot in, Susan is representative of a system that is just mistreating its women like crazy. Rhea represents the extreme version of that system that has created a monster, basically. So like it's great to see because our characters are traveling through these dead worlds, and then we get to an ideal world, and through the rot at the core of it, we can kind of see, okay, so this is how this happened, right? Like we have this ideal, beautiful place, this picturesque village. How did it get destroyed? Oh, well, here's the corruption, here's the rot, here's the sexism, here's the way we destroyed all these people kind of from the inside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
I like it. Okay. That's all I had to talk about that. Did you have anything that you specifically wanted to talk about?
The only thing that I wanted to talk about is the name Wizard in Glass.
Okay.
Just because it's kind of much less clear to me than the other book names. Like we got the Gunslinger. It's about the Gunslinger. We've got the Drawing of the Three. It's about he draws 3 out of doors. Wizard in Glass. It's like, okay, well, I mean, I'm not completely obtuse. Like we've got kind of the Wizard of Oz element. We've got the flag element, being the wizard, sort of but he's so far behind the curtain that he's almost irrelevant. Like he just kind of shows up there at the end, and you could argue like, well, he was pulling the strings the whole time, and I'm like, yeah, maybe, but it's still weird to name your book that. But I guess it is sort of like the Wizard of Oz is also behind the curtain the whole time, and he sort of has very little actual impact on that story, and yet it's still called The Wizard of Oz. It's not called Dorothy's Adventure into whatever. Yeah. And then the end glass part is throws me even more because it's like, okay, there's the grapefruit, which is a glass orb, but then why isn't it not like the wizard and the glass, or wizard and just wizard and glass? I don't know, man. The whole time I was waiting for this title to make sense, and it never quite made sense. Like it's not jarringly wrong, but I was like, am I just not understanding something really obvious, or am I thinking too much about this? I don't know.
I mean, what if you used glass in here to mean, like, colloquially, a mirror? right?
Sure. Looking glass, yeah.
Yeah, like literally like a looking glass. And therefore that is like, it is both literally Marilyn's grapefruit and also Roland looking at his past, looking at himself for the first time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I guess also like the Emerald Palace sort of looks like it's glass, but I like your answer better actually. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, I think King's playing with all this stuff for sure.
Yeah.
I think because to me the wizard is there because that's the climax of the story, is the confrontation with the wizard. And with the glass, right? That is the climax of the story is Roland confronting both the wizard and the glass. So he's confronting wizard and glass in the Emerald City. Yeah, cool. I like it. I don't know if there's much more meaning beyond that, but if anyone else has any other ideas about this book title, I'd love to hear them. Yeah, I mean, even just why isn't it the wizard and the glass? Like, because that doesn't sound as cool. It doesn't sound as cool, but yeah, wizard and glass, boom. It's got a ring to it. It does. All right, Matt, now it is time for the part of the show where you have to put on your prediction hat. And I want you to tell me, what is the story going to do next? Where are we going from here? I'm trying to decide if their battle with the guys in the Thinny was Helm's Deep or if Helm's Deep hasn't happened yet. Okay. I'm also trying to decide if Roland facing his past and coming back from the journey stronger was Aragorn going down to talk to the ghosts of the men who he then convinced to help him in the Battle of Pelennor Fields, or if that hasn't happened yet. So basically, your prediction engine here is just running off of Lord of the Rings comparisons. Look. So last time I said to myself, well, I'm not just going to like think about what happened in Lord of the Rings and try to make predictions, because surely that wouldn't work. And the fact is that probably would have worked better than I thought. So I'm gonna throw out some ideas. Okay, they're gonna have to talk to some more dead people. Maybe it's gonna look like the Jawbone thing. Maybe it's gonna look like something else. Okay. Get some help from some dead people. There is going to be potentially another separation of the party. There's going to be journeying into a very dangerous place, potentially with a new party member who we don't like or trust. Okay. There is going to be I'm about out of it because look, like I don't think that this is the type of story that's going to have a big epic battle. And the end of the other weird thing that I'm noticing is like I feel like narratively we're like up to or perhaps all the way through what I'll consider the Rohan part of the story. And really after the Rohan part of the story, there's the Battle of Gondor, and there's a bunch. If anything, it's more heavily loaded with what's going on with Sam and Frodo, which is really just a lot of slogging and suffering and stuff with Gollum. So there's not a lot left for me to pattern match on, actually. So I think I'm just going to stop there. Okay. And say it's possible that I've run out of runway with my Lord of the Rings system. Sure. But sure. Maybe you need to start bringing some other books into it, Matt. You never know. I mean, we got the Wizard of Oz here. We never would have expected that. Maybe you need to pull some. I don't want to say it because I don't remember. Just pull some other books in. I'll have to think about what other books need to be pulled in. It could be anything. Lord of the Flies. Okay. In any book that's been referenced in this book, I guess, is a good place to start. Yeah. Just wait till we get to the talking rabbits. You got no idea. Yeah, I probably should be more literal with stuff like that too. Like, like the, are they going to find vials where they have to swallow one to make themselves bigger and then the other one makes them smaller or whatever? Oh, so we're going full Alice, I wonder. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, we will see. We've got 4 whole books left still. 2 of them very long. I think The Dark Tower is... The final book, by the way, is called The Dark Tower. I think it's longer than Wizard and Glass. I don't remember. It's longer or about as long.
Well, that's exciting.
Okay, we have one more. I just counted episodes. We're doing 13 episodes on The Dark Tower, so it is technically longer. And Wolves of the Calla is pretty long too. And Songs of Susanna is a very short book. It'll be the shortest one since the first one. So we're getting there, man. We're getting there. We got a lot of journeying left to do, and I'm excited. I am really excited for these next 3 books. You know, there is. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Wizard and Glass is, I think, my favorite book in the series to read. I am very excited to talk to you about the things that happen in the next 3 books, because there's a lot here. I think King is as he's approaching the end of a series, I think he's starting to kind of, focus what he wants this book series as a whole to be about. And when I realized my interpretation of what this whole thing was about, I fell absolutely in love with it, more in love with it than I had ever been. So I am very much looking forward to having those conversations with you. It's going to be really cool.
Awesome. Can't wait.
All right, so let's move right along then and move to our mailbag questions. We got a bunch of questions from y'all, and we're going to try to answer as many of them as we can. And we're doing good on time for once, so I think we'll be able to answer these calmly and slowly and take our time with them, Matt. So good for us.
Yeah.
Pat on the back. First up, we have Man of Zimmer, who asks, now that you finished reading Wizard and Glass, do you have any intention of going through the comics? It starts at the beginning of the story chronologically with Roland's test of manhood, and then bridges the gap leading up to the Gunslinger, including the fall of Gilead and the Battle of Jericho Hill. It's a great supplement to the books, and the artwork is really well done. Check it out. Yeah, I have I've gone back and forth on this, Matt. You and I think I have said this before on other shows, that we are not like good at reading comics. We don't read comics as much. And it's kind of like poetry to me, where I'm not as confident in my ability to like analyze and talk about a comic book. But I do think it would be fun to dive into at least the beginning stuff that does fill in those Jericho Hill gaps and the fall of Gilead. And you can kind of see those gaps there of stuff we haven't seen yet. So I don't know. By the time we'll see when we finish this journey, what we feel like doing and what we don't.
Are they written by King?
They are not. I do not think they are.
That makes me slightly less interested, but I still think it would be fun anyway. I think it would be fun to own these regardless. Mm-hmm. I've moved too many times in my life to really want to own books ever, because then you have to carry them.
Oh my God. I'm moving in the spring, and I'm
sorry.
I have so many books. This is the longest I've lived in one place in my adult life, and I have nested, and there's so many books. I am terrified. So I feel that, but I'm going to also keep buying books because I can't help myself.
I have this problem that my dad gave me all these books that I can't throw away. But anyway, I might buy these because it seems like graphic novels are fairly low footprint in terms of portability. So
there's actually, I think they did them for I think it's called the Gunslinger Beginnings, where it's this prequel stuff. But I think they've also made graphic novels for the Gunslinger and the Drawing of the Three, where they just told the entire story of those books in graphic novel. I've not read them, but
sort of seems to be what I'm seeing on Amazon. It seems to be the Gunslinger, the Beginnings, the Drawing of the Three, complete graphic novel series. Cool.
And I don't know if they're still planning on going through the rest of them. That's going to be wild. I'm just imagining how fucking long a Wizard and Glass graphic novel would be.
The Drawing of the Three hardcover graphic novel complete series is $103 American dollars.
Jesus.
So that might be an obstacle to ownership of this particular.
Yikes.
Anyway, we'll talk about that later.
Yes, we will. The next question.
Okay, I'll read this one.
Okay, sure.
Defiant Supermarket says, do you picture the action of the Dark Tower to be similar to a certain style of movie or TV show? Personally, all the action in the Dark Tower is very Tarantino-like. I first noticed this when Eddie and Roland fight in Balazar's tower. The way King described the guns as blowing people off their feet immediately made me think of Django and all the action of that movie. And once again, when Roland's quartet cleans house, again, Jonas, I felt the same way. The Pape's jaw getting blown off is totally something that you'd see in a Tarantino film. Constantly, I picture the Dark Tower being told in a Tarantino style. It's pretty much my dream that King and him would somehow team up, even though I doubt it'll ever happen. Any other Tarantino fans out there that feel the same? Or is there any other director slash style that you picture the Dark Tower portrayed as? I mean, that's certainly a really good matchup, particularly because of the Western. I mean, it really works well with just imagining Django. I think that King does love like making something gratuitously violent,
Yes.
like blowing off the front part of somebody's face just because he can, bloody violent stabbings and so forth. Very Tarantino there, sort of going for the shock factor of things. I think they both enjoy that. And so I think that would work well.
Sure. I like Tarantino a lot. I enjoy his movies. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is one of my favorite movies of last year. See it if you haven't already. I'm trying to think like I don't want to hire someone to be a director of the Dark Tower because they like shoot really gratuitous action, right? Because I just feel like I don't feel like that's the key thing to the series. But I totally agree that it is over the top violent in that kind of way. I'm so bad at like fan casting and like saying. I think it's just because the way I read, like my brain's weird. Like I don't picture action as I'm reading it. My brain doesn't work that way. I don't see it. Like it's not a movie playing in my head. So linking a style of action in a book to a style of a director action I like is very difficult for me. But of course, as soon as you said Tarantino, I was like, yeah, I can see that now. But my brain doesn't go there first.
Yeah, right. I'm always hesitant to say, like, I no longer even, I don't necessarily want to see adaptations of the things that I really like. Like, I sort of do, but I sort of don't, because then you run the risk that your imagination image is going to be stamped over with whatever the director wanted to do with that scene.
Sure. Well, I mean, we're like 9 months away from watching the Dark Tower movie, so I'm sure you'll have a lot of thoughts about that when we get there.
I'm just gonna keep that in a special like clean room of my mind so that it doesn't contaminate anything else.
Yeah, I guess this is a good time to talk about the TV series that never was.
Yeah,
which would have, based on my understanding, covered most of Wizard and Glass. It would have covered the events of Magus. And I don't know if I've told you who was playing Jonas. Did I tell you that?
You did, yeah. I forgot his name though. I don't know his name.
So did I. What? It's oh my god, Michael Rooker.
Yeah.
Yes, Michael Rooker. Who would have just been a perfect Jonas. Like he would have been perfect.
Yeah. I agree. He's one of those guys. I don't actually have his image queued up in my brain, but if it helps, he was the blue guy in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Mary Poppins.
Yondu. Yeah, Mary Poppins. Yondu.
No, I think he would have been a perfect Jonas. And like, I don't know. I just like many of the people listening to this right now, I listened to the Dark Tower episode of the Kingcast that the friend of the show, Scott Wampler, hosts, and where the showrunner of that show talked for a long, long time about what that show could have been, and it broke my heart too. But yeah, I don't know. I people like to get excited about adaptations because it's always fun to see the thing you read on the screen. But I'm kind of with you where I'm just like, it's gonna be bad. Like it's just not gonna be great. So
yeah, right.
I don't know. Yeah, Tarantino will definitely never do that though. It's not his thing.
I mean, that's the other thing is it's such a sprawling story, and Tarantino is known for economical, extremely tense, tight movies. So like, there's not a lot of sprawl in his movies, and I just don't think that's a good matchup in terms of storytelling.
Sure. I also think like just adaptation wise, I mean, maybe 4 books in, you can kind of see how just like difficult this thing would be to adapt in general. There's like a lot. Yeah. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah, this is one of those things where the medium sort of influences what it is. Yeah.
All right. Next up, we have a question from Chris A, who says, in short, what do you guys think that both Eddie and Henry did for a living? I've always wondered about this. I think they must have done something, seeing as how they have an apartment, albeit a shitty one. They had to have money to eat. Yeah, I mean, we see Eddie being a drug mule, right? Mm. And we see Henry, like, obviously worked for Balazar as well. So, I mean, they're just kind of in the pocket of gangsters, but like, were they holding down other jobs? I doubt it. I mean, we don't. Do we go into their apartment? I can't remember.
I don't think so.
Because he gets out in front of it and never sets foot in, right? Because the van comes up like immediately after. So we never actually see it in their apartment, which could just be like the worst kind of shitty like government housing that's just run down and like a heroin den, basically.
Yeah.
We don't really get to see how they're living. So I doubt they're making much money if at all.
Right. You kind of imagine like Eddie, loading bags at the supermarket as a teenager, and then Henry coming back from the war and roping him into his whole thing, and so like I sort of imagine Eddie having like a few odd jobs here and there, but he's actually, it's easy to forget how young he is. So he wouldn't have been working for very long, regardless of whatever he were doing.
Yeah.
And then, like he doesn't appear to be like employed at the time of the drug mule episode. So
sure. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right that there's no way Henry got back from the war and he hasn't had a job since. Totally. He's suffering from PTSD. He's struggling, and maybe the government's giving him some money, but probably not very much, and he's basically relying on Eddie, and Eddie is holding down jobs to keep them both in money, but minimum wage jobs that he's probably getting fired from because he's also become an addict. I can see that. I can definitely see that.
It makes me wonder, like I literally don't know, did the veterans after Vietnam, like, were they given some kind of retirement pension type thing, or was it just like, all right, war's over, see ya?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it depends. Henry was injured, right? So I assume he got some, probably not even close to sufficient like coverage on being injured, because he probably couldn't work right away. But I mean, our government is notoriously shitty to veterans, so I don't want to speculate too positively in the government's favor, especially after Vietnam. Which, oh my god,
right? Yeah. I mean, you can assume it was just enough money to ensure that he was able to get addicted to heroin. Yeah,
great. Yeah, here's a little spending money. Go out and buy some heroin.
Yeah,
and we certainly will not help you get off that drug at all. Yeah.
Yep,
a problem we're still having today. Hooray!
Yay! Next from I Will Rarely Comment. They say, Matt, are you looking up the illustrations for these books as you read them? There's pretty impressive artwork throughout the books with illustrations. Just wondering if that's on your radar as an audiobook listener.
We can answer these. He asked a few questions.
Yeah.
So let's answer this one first.
Yeah. I have seen some of the book covers. I think I have like the drawing of the three is like some doors on the beach. The Blaine, I saw one Blaine one because I think it loads on the audiobook actually, which is just like a demonic like 19th century steam locomotive with like a literal demonic face, which has nothing to do with, well, I mean, I guess it doesn't have nothing to do with it, but it's extremely jarringly incongruous relative to what Blaine actually looks like. I don't know if I remember what the cover of this book looks like, interestingly. So I guess my answer is I could probably stand to pay more attention to this.
This book, I have the book. Well, the most recent cover, the one that's probably on the audiobook you're listening to, is a glass ball with a tower inside of it, and the rook skull, Cuthbert's rook skull, was also inside the glass ball for some reason. I don't know.
Yes. Yes, I remember that. Yes.
I am on occasion sending you artwork. Like if I'm going and pulling my notes and I see a picture, like I did this for the Wastelands a lot, right? When they got to the actual Wastelands in that book, I sent you a bunch of pictures of what the artwork in that book showed for the Wastelands. So if I find something that I think, oh, Matt definitely needs to see this, I am sending it over to you. But I think generally, no, you're not going out and looking them up on your own.
No, I don't. Well, I don't go out of my way to look things up on my own anyway, because
it's
I'm
too
afraid
risky. Too risky.
But yeah, no, the Wastelands art was fucking rad, actually.
Yeah.
So.
So then they ask me.
They ask Scott. They say, Scott, I can't remember if you gave Matt a semi-detailed plot summary of Flag's role in the Stand or not. But they want to know if you're going to go over it.
They want to know if I'm going to go over some future books, which I've removed from the question to not spoil you as we go into the books 5 through 7.
Okay.
I think in the way in which I have done for the Stand, which is kind of very minor and brief, to maybe give a little bit of supplementary information, like FYI, this is a reference to something else that you might not be getting. I'm going to do it in that way. There are several books that are directly referenced, several King books that are directly referenced coming up in the next few books. And I will treat them that way. Like I'm not gonna run down and give you the entire plot of a novel. But like I did with the Stand, I'm going to say, like, here's what the reference is. This is why this is referencing this. And this is maybe just to give you a little bit of more information on who this person is or why we are here or stuff like that. I don't think any of that is necessary to enjoy these books. Like, I don't think, like, I mean, Matt, you can be the judge of this. You have not read The Stand. Did you feel like you were missing something in this book at any time because you had not read The Stand?
No, I mean, I feel like King is just adding breadth to his universe, and if I want to go read The Stand sometimes, I'll read that, and I'll get it even more than I already do, and it'll be delightful. But like, I mean, I think if I were to like stop reading The Dark Tower and then us do The Stand for a while, then I would just forget everything about The Dark Tower. Like that would really interrupt the flow, right? So
yeah. I'll make this comment now, and then hopefully I won't have to say it again. I love the really complicated read list that people like to put together of like the way to read The Dark Tower and the way to read King's universe, where you read a couple of the Dark Tower books and then you read some of the books that are going to be mentioned in the Dark, like this really complicated list of like 30 books. I think that stuff's really cool and I love it. It is entirely unnecessary for your first read. That is my opinion. Some people might disagree with that. That's fine. I do not think you need to approach this series that way the first time you read it. Subsequent reads, knock yourself out. Go crazy. Do any kind of mixed up order or jumping off to read other books. Do it. And it's fun, and you will enjoy it, and you will have a great time. First time through, nah, you don't need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I was already, like I already mentioned, sort of forgetting about Eddie and Susanna, just because this book had a book inside the book, so we could book while it booked. And it would be way worse if I had to read several other books before getting back to them.
Yeah. I mean, The Stand is like a 1,100 page book, so it would take a while to cover it in this way if we wanted to do it that way.
Yes.
And maybe one day, Matt, we will do The Stand. Maybe. But we got to finish The Dark Tower first.
Okay. All right. If you insist.
All right. Next up, we have Rob the Gob, and they've got a few questions for us. The first one here is for you, Matt. Has the series met your expectations or the hype that Scott may have built up?
I mean, for sure. Weirdly, like, I don't understand why this book isn't talked about as like one of the gems of fantasy. Maybe it's because it doesn't quite squarely fit in that hole as just being fantasy. It's a weird story. It's I mean, short answer, I think it's, if anything, surpassed the hype, because all Scott really did was say, like, this is the project that we're going to do because you made me do Worm. He didn't necessarily spend a ton of energy like telling me that it was incredible. I've decided that it's incredible on my own. So
yeah. Our working relationship is one where basically we know each other well enough to where if I say, Matt, I want to do a show on this, trust me, it's really good, it's going to be like, okay.
Right.
and vice versa, right?
Right. Yeah. We're both sensitive to not waste the other person's time with something we don't think they'll like. I think that's one way of putting it. Yeah.
Rob also has another question for you here, Matt. Does reading the series make you want to dive deeper into King's work and find all the connections to the Dark Tower?
It does. I mean, I think that I am now a Stephen King fan, and sort of already mentally queued up, like, okay, really seems like The Stand is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to reading The Stand. Definitely going to read The Stand. I mean, you'll if anything, you'll have to help me make a list of, like, okay, probably The Shining, but then beyond that, like, what are the top King novels that just everybody absolutely has to read?
Yeah, well, I have a dream for season 2 of this show is us covering the books that are close, like, if the Dark Tower series is the center of King's universe, then season 2 would be us covering the books, closest around the ring, around the tower, right? The Stand being one of them, as you've seen in this book. There are some others that I won't mention quite yet, but I think it would be fun to cover those books. I don't want to commit us to that yet, because this is a project that from beginning to end is going to take 15 months. I don't want to commit us to another 18 months of books to read and discuss, but we'll see when we get there. But yeah, I mean, you can come to me for lists all you want. I will give you great detail about which books you should read and which ones you should start with and all that. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
I do something you had talked about that I wanted to talk about, and then I jumped onto the next question, but I wanted to circle back to is your comment about, like, why don't people talk more about this series? I do kind of agree that that's weird, and I think maybe it's just it's a combination of the way Stephen King is viewed in our culture, and I think, like, this is, like, Stephen King is one of the most popular, well-known, best-selling authors of all time, but even amongst people that know Stephen King really well, The Dark Tower is kind of his, like, little weird side project. Like, it's this massive 8-book story, but most everyday people, when they think Stephen King, don't think of Dark Tower. They think of it. They think of The Shining. It's so funny to me that these books are like his like little niche weird project thing. It's so fun. Like, he's a massive author. Maybe it's just because he's written so much,
Yeah. Another thought that just occurred to me is like almost all the fantasy stories that are popular are boilerplate coming of age stories. Plus, okay, that's extremely reductive. Most of them, at their core, they're about, like, a young man or woman going on a quest on which they grow up and fight the bad guy. Mm-hmm. And this story starts out with this hardened gunslinger, and then from there it just gets even more weird and windy. And so it's less of a clear hook for your average, like, 13-year-old who's just finished The Wheel of Time and looking for their next fantasy novel. Even stuff like Song of Ice and Fire, which is in some sense a kind of reaction to a lot of these tropes, is still doing a lot of the tropes. Whereas this story, it's a bit all over the place in terms of what tropes it's choosing to use and play with.
Sure.
So I'm just trying to think of like why this story never really comes up in the same breath as your other typical giant fantasy sagas.
Yeah. Cool. Rab has one final question. This one's for me. Scott, are you nervous about moving into the next books with Matt since the series continues to get weirder and weirder? I think I was about 6 months ago. I'm not anymore. I think I can tell that Matt is along for the ride now. And yes, the series is going to get weirder. Spoilers, Matt. God, you ain't seen nothing yet, man. It's going to get wild. But I think you're bought into the world and you're bought into the characters enough that I think you're just going to be along for the ride. Again, I think, to circle back to something we said earlier, I think I know your tastes pretty well by now, and I know the stuff that you like, and seeing the parts of the story that were working really, really well on you has me totally confident that even as things get weird and fucking crazy in the next few books, I think you're bought into it in a way that it's going to work great.
Yeah, I mean, I love weird shit, and I am bought into these characters, and I'm bought into this world, and I want to figure out what's going on. So yeah. All right, next question. Perjane says, I love that Roland is serious and curious about Earth stories because a culture's stories help us learn a great deal about the people. So what story would you tell Roland to teach him about America 2020?
Oh my God.
I mean, The Stand, right? No, I don't know.
Any story that you could try to tell to explain what the fuck America in 2020 is like. Someone versed in storytelling would be like, nah, man, that's too on the nose. Like, you gotta, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
It sounds fake.
It's the B movie, except every time you say the word B, it gets faster. That's it. That's my answer.
That's a great answer. Yeah. I don't actually know. I mean, like, what story, what popular pop culture story really encapsulates what it's like to live in America in the year 2020? I really don't know. I don't know. It's such this new reality that we all live in is still, it's so new to me. Like, I can't believe it's August, man. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What I'm curious about is there's going to be a lot of films and a lot of books and a lot of stories created about the pandemic. But what I'm curious about is the stories created during the pandemic that aren't necessarily about it, because I think they're going to capture a mood and a feeling of what it's like to be alive on this planet right now without like directly referencing the things.
Yeah.
Like I think we said after 2016, like there's going to be a lot of very fascinating art made about the times of the Trump administration in our country. And not all of it is going to be necessarily about the president, but it is going to be a reaction to the national mood about the president. And I think the same thing is going to happen with what's going on right now in our country and the world. And I think that's going to be really fascinating, the ways in which it channels those emotions and those feelings, everything that we're feeling, but doesn't necessarily have to be, this is about the pandemic.
Right. You know? I think everyone feels some degree of being lost and afraid and angry and confused. It seems like every year since like 2015, there's been this meme of like 2014 thought it was crazy. Look at what happened in 2015. And then that happens every year. And that's because things are actually accelerating. And we're on an acceleration trajectory. We're not it's not like, 2021, everything's going to calm down again. Like, that's not how this works.
Yeah. No. Wow.
Yeah.
No.
The consequence is that I'm trying to think of a story where the theme of the story is people who are out of their depth, because I think we all feel out of our depth. Probably something by the Coen brothers. Fargo. There you go.
Fargo, the story of our generation.
Or I was going to say the one with the dude, but that's too optimistic and lighthearted.
No, hell no.
No, it's Fargo.
If there's any Coen brothers
Blood
movie
Simple
that You're just naming movies now. I mean, like Inside Llewyn Davis is like a depressing, somber, a person is mourning the death of his best friend movie. And I think that fits my mood right now.
Yeah, no, see, I think Blood Simple fits better than Fargo because Blood Simple is absolutely about confusion and people trying to do things and the things not working because they don't realize that somebody else already killed that guy over there, etc.
God, I would love to do another whole series on the Coens. I know we've done one, but that was back when we only did one episode on them.
Yeah.
I really want to watch all these movies again and really think about them.
But I think the Coens capture the spirit of our times, is what I'm saying.
There you go. All right. Next up, we have Luke V, who says all of the created king-isms and catchphrases you've come across in the Dark Tower, or potentially otherwise, what are your favorite? I've personally taken to saying "I cry your pardon" to my wife when I piss her off, which only serves to piss her off further, as well as "you believe that happy crappy? You don't tell me, I tell you." That's great. What I'm curious about this for you, Matt, because like I have 1,000 different king-isms in my head.
I mean, the main one that I think to myself is "you've forgotten the face of your father," which I've never actually said to my kids, because then I would have to explain. But yeah, that's my favorite by far.
That's great. I like that one a lot too. I say "thank you, Sai" a lot to people, and you say "true," I say "thank you." I say that to people sometimes. My like new one, and this is a little bit surprising to me, is how much bird and bear and hare and fish implanted itself in my head on this read of this book.
Yeah.
That is something that I find just popping into my head randomly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. That one doesn't happen for me. I will say one thing that happened, like you and I will just be chatting and you'll like mention something that happened that was good or bad or really almost anything. And I'll just respond, "Ka." So, right. So that's definitely a thing with me now, I guess.
We put an emote for that on our Discord, and that's just if I see someone say something like, yeah, something random happened.
Why did this happen to me? Ka.
Ka. It's great.
Yeah. All right. Next one from Megs. They say, which book has been your favorite of the series so far? Who is your favorite quartet, and which has been your favorite genre that has been explored so far in the series? Favorite book in the series so far? Man.
It's a hard question, right?
I mean, there's something like I think maybe my favorite moment of the series is Roland opening the door on the beach and us arriving in Eddie Dean's head and just being like, "Oh my God, this is gonna be a wild ride, isn't it?" Just be the surprise of that moment of just like, what the hell? And that is such a great moment that it makes me want to call that my favorite book. But there's obviously so much great stuff in this book we just finished too. They're just very different from each other. And I'm the kind of person where my favorites will like jockey from day to day, depending on my mood. So sure. I hesitate to answer that. Favorite of the quartet? Oi. I don't know how to answer. I mean, I love all of them different in different ways. I probably relate to Eddie the most.
Sure.
Favorite genre that's been explored in the series? Well, we've just spent so much time in the Western setting, and I love the fun mixture of like fantasy Western. So I'm just gonna go with that because that's fresh on my mind, and it's also it seems to be the thing that is the most like original about this series.
Sure. Yeah. My answer is really quick. I mean, I said at the beginning that Wizard and Glass is my favorite book in the series. I think that remains true. I will say that on this journey, I think The Drawing of the Three is the best book we've read so far. Possibly not my favorite, but the best. I think it is. Right. It is damn near a perfect novel. It's so good. It's so fucking good.
Yeah.
And I just want to give a shout out to the unloved stepchild of the Dark Tower series, The Gunslinger, which I think is actually this fascinating, fantastic little book that doesn't it doesn't work in some ways. It doesn't flow like it's you can tell it's early writing, but it's this beautiful little experiment, and it's short, so like it's not a lot of investment. I've actually just gone back and reread The Gunslinger twice since we finished reading it, just for fun, just for fun.
Like
I just went and reread it again.
Of course.
I mean, it takes like a day, maybe less. It takes a few hours, and I just love it. I just love it. It's this fascinating little experiment of Kings, and I love it. So that's my answer.
Cool.
I love Cuthbert / Eddie. I love them both so much. I will always love them both. I love them even more on this reread. And I agree with you on Western. King, when he says, I'm going to do some Western stuff and mess with it, it is my favorite thing ever because it is so different from what he tends to normally do. And I love it.
Yeah, I think I love that it's not just Western. It's Stephen King's Western, right? Like the stuff, the You've Forgotten the Face of Your Father stuff makes it so much. It elevates it, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
Cool.
All right, next we have... Oh, wait, it's your turn, right? No, is it my turn? No, it's my turn, yeah. Rebecca B., who asks, what is your favorite part of Wizard and Glass? Rebecca also asked what was our favorite book in the series, but someone beat her to that. Sorry, Rebecca. But what was your favorite part of Wizard and Glass / which part surprised you the most?
I mean...
Matt, how about you?
I think Rhea. I know that's not what the question asked, but...
Rhea is your favorite part?
Character is a part, right?
Sure.
Rhea, she's so wonderfully awful.
Mm-hmm.
She's gross and evil, and I hate her. And she's probably the thing that like stuck with me the most, like in terms of putting down the audiobook and what am I thinking about as I go about my day. I'm thinking about this creepy, horrible, sort of childish, but also clever witch.
Sure.
And probably surprised me the most as well, actually. I could probably give a better answer to that with more thinking, but that's my off the cuff answer.
Well, I got a question for you. I actually meant to talk about this earlier and I totally forgot until now. You know, the fascinating thing about Rhea to me is we have this moment where Roland spares her life when he doesn't have to, but he kills her snake. And the book kind of tells us that is the reason she fucking destroys him as revenge for killing her precious snake. And so is the lesson that Roland gained from this experience one of mercy is bad?
Well, seems like it. I mean, he doesn't seem to be a particularly merciful person. I can't think of any other instances in the story where he has been put in a situation where mercy was required. Like he doesn't like kill people he doesn't need to kill, but he also doesn't like when he saves Jake from the people down in the in the Lud underground, he just kind of blows everybody away without hesitation. So that's interesting to think about.
Yeah, cool. My favorite part, honestly, Jonas and Coral Thorin.
Yeah, that was great. I agree. I mean, that was a great part.
I think so. I mean, obviously, like Roland and Susan, and I've actually seen some comments and been talking to a few people who say Susan is not a good character, and I just totally disagree. I don't want to get into exactly why. I think we talked about her, for hours and hours and hours over the past 11 episodes, but I think characters like Jonas and Coral are the type of characters that on reread, when you're when you're reading quickly, you don't really pay a lot of attention to. And then those are the moments that I think fade from your memory the fastest when you're like looking back at the series once you finished it all. And so their relationship and the complexity of them as people was something that I had forgotten about, to be entirely honest with you, that I didn't have a clear memory of Jonas as a character not just this is the bad guy that Roland fights in Magus. That's all it was. And so I was very pleasantly surprised with just how complex and fully fleshed out he was. And I should have been surprised because it's Stephen King and that's what he does. But I loved the two of them. I loved the interesting little wrinkles of their relationship that was like bordering on love in some ways. I loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it so much.
Right. I loved all the moments when like she would be like fondly stroking his hair and he would be like tolerating it until he stopped tolerating it. Just like they both have like good instincts toward each other, but then they can't fully actually commit to it because they're both assholes.
Sure.
I love it. Okay, next question. Public Defender 716 says, my question is for Matt. Given what Rhea said about the ball, said in the ball about Roland getting everyone he loves killed, who out of the quartet will make it to the end of the book with Roland? Obviously, everyone will. That's the answer. Everyone's going to be fine.
All right.
I mean, I think it would be kind of fucked up if Jake died again. So I'm going to say Jake makes it. And we've got a lot of death flags on Oi. I think Oi might not make it. And as for Susanna and Eddie, I think either they both die or they both live, but I'm not. I don't think one of them will die. That's my prediction.
Okay.
All right.
I cannot participate in this question, so
Yes.
we will move right along.
Okay.
We move on to a question from Nick Grew, who says, do you think this series is about Roland's test of knighthood? And Nick actually gave us this pretty lengthy like explanation of the source poem for this child Roland. What do you think about that, Matt?
I don't know. I'm trying to make it fit because I mean he seems like the best gunslinger who ever lived, so he seems like he's already a knight. But if this is supposed to be, I mean, his test of knighthood was testing the line with court, so we're speaking more metaphorically. Yeah. He needs to. He's testing himself against God or fate or something like that. Ka, right? Mm-hmm. Sure, in that sense. I still don't know. I think the reason why I'm equivocating here is that I still don't really understand what the tower is. I still don't understand what it represents as a symbol fully, other than, okay, it's the thing that he's obsessed with, fine. But what is it? Sure. What does it do? If I understood that, I feel like I could have a better answer here.
Sure. I mean, I think you're supposed to not be clear on that, for sure.
Okay. Cool. As for the what does the Dark Tower symbolize? Yeah, I don't know. I'm sort of like we've said before stuff about the Dark Tower is obsession, but like abstract obsession. So like it's sort of a symbol that I'm waiting for it to be filled in with concrete details. Well,
I mean, the tendency of anyone analyzing a book is to take an external symbol and internalize it to your character, right? So the question is, it's not just what does the Dark Tower represent in the story, but what does the Dark Tower metaphorically mean to Roland? And I think the fun part of that is then saying, okay, well, we've witnessed over the course of these last two books, everyone in Roland's quartet become as if not arguably in some instances more obsessed with finding the tower than he is. And then that question becomes, okay, what is that? What if we internalize that metaphor? What does that mean to Eddie? What does it mean to Susanna? What does it mean to Jake? And we just don't have answers for those questions yet. It's still a little bit too abstract, but I think those are things we definitely need to be thinking about for sure. Yeah,
like that's the big mystery. Is like, does Roland plan to somehow fix his mistakes, or does he believe that he can't do that? And this is. Yeah, I'm repeating myself. I just don't. I don't know why he's there, and so it's hard for me to answer the question.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we'll get there. Yeah. We'll get there.
All right. Eric T says, Matt, as an inconstant reader, what is your takeaway of King versus his stereotype as a pulpy, lowest common denominator author? What in the Dark Tower really makes the case for his either being lowbrow or misrepresented? I mean, I think that he's really good at appealing to our desire to read about sex and violence and to be titillated. I mean, he's always called a horror writer, and like horror. I kind of want to read that Dance Macabre book that you talk about sometimes.
Yes, please do. Please do. So good.
Because I feel like his thoughts on what horror is would actually help unlock like my answer to this question a bit better, because what he's really just trying to do is he's trying to key in on people's emotions and make us feel a wide range of intense emotions. And that's awesome as far as I can tell. And I think that gets lumped in with like, oh, it's just pulp, it's just lowest common denominator stuff, because some books are just only trying to titillate and excite and manipulate your emotions. But the thing about King that I've discovered, and I think I already believe this, because I mean, there's a reason why people make movies out of all of his books. It's because they're amazing stories. They have complex characters. They have deep and rich characters. So, yes, to circle back around and answer more succinctly, he gets lumped in as being pulpy because he focuses so much on, violence and sex. But the reason why his stories are lasting and the reason everyone loves them is because of the deep characters and the ideas and the themes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next sub question, Scott, as a constant reader, what do you think people should recognize about King, and what would you point to as evidence?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Eric. To piggyback off of what Matt was saying there, I think King is pulpy. Like, I just think that's true. I just think King, like any genius author out there, can use something as a tool to talk about something else. And I think King writes for the average human being, right? He is writing to be exciting. He is writing to titillate. He is writing to entertain. He is writing for your average human being that just wants to open up a book and be entertained. And he is using that pulpy, everyman, lowest common denominator, quote unquote, type of story to kind of sneak in some really complicated stuff. And that's what I love the most about him. And I think that people should recognize that while obviously he is a large, appeal to the mass pop author, that doesn't mean that it is inherently without value. I think that's one thing we do, right? When we say we love to put people in boxes, right? And the box for pulp and the box for, pop fiction is the box of things that shouldn't be taken seriously, basically. Especially in the horror genre, especially, when the masses look at horror as that's that horror stuff, and they just kind of write it off. But smart, talented, incredible authors can take that genre, take that pulp, take that lowest common denominator stuff, and kind of sneak very powerful themes and messaging and explorations into your head without you realizing it. And I just think that's what King does so well. I mean, like, you can write a book that's about ghost stories and it's about a haunted hotel, but what it really is about is a man fighting against his alcoholism, fighting against who he is, trying to rediscover the good side of himself. But it's still an entertaining as hell book to read. And so it's just smart and clever. And I don't know. I just feel like people need to, like, we love to draw the line between novels and literature,
Yeah.
And I don't think we need to do that. Like, books have different goals, and we don't have to toss something into a box and say that's pop fiction. It doesn't deserve to be considered.
Yeah. I mean, I hate it when people behave that way. I love some literature, and I love a lot of pulp, or a lot of trash fantasy, if you will. Yeah. It is funny. There's this one movie that I keep thinking of. It is very pulpy subject matter. Can't remember. It was very popular. It's by Quentin Tarantino. Pulp Fiction. Which, I mean, that's like the perfect example of what you were just talking about, right? Where
do you mean the Palme d'Or winning film Pulp Fiction?
Right, the film where he literally just makes the most like sex and violence laden thing. Mostly violence if we're being honest, but the most violent and appealing to the prurient interest movie that he can. But of course also it is just this perfectly made, beautiful and rather complex and layered story about with themes and all kinds of things. So yes,
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Genre is a tool to trick people into learning about the human condition.
Yeah.
You use aliens and monsters and magic and dragons to incept opinions and feelings and themes and ideas into people's heads. And I think King is one of the authors that does that very well.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like literary fiction is just another genre. Like it sort of has its own tropes. They're more meta, but the approaches used in literary fiction are often more similar to one another than they are different. So
sure, yeah.
The final sub question from Eric was saying that for both of us. Eric says, "I enjoy your musings on Ka. How has your idea of it evolved from the gunslinger to the present? We had Ka talk to Roland directly in the last book. Does that impact how you would define it? There's been a lot of discussion about groups, Ka-tets, and there's an obvious etymology interplay between Ka and Ka-tet. Based on that, what is tet? And is Ka fate for everyone, or does Ka impact and work through just a Ka-tet? Is random chance Ka, or is it like King's evil as described by your listeners, something that has to work through people?" I mean, that's maybe okay. So maybe one way of phrasing
that's a lot of questions.
Yeah. So just like my reaction to these questions is like, I would rephrase some of this possibly as like, is Ka an agent, or is Ka a description of like some people talk about karma as almost being like an agent that goes about righting wrongs and balancing things, and then some people are just like, oh, the world just works a certain way and that is karma, and they don't imply any kind of agency behind it. And so, Ka having a voice, that's actually a pretty big revelation. If we take it literally, of course. If we take it literally, then Ka has a voice, meaning Ka has agency, meaning Ka potentially has a plan and wants things to go a certain way and is actually pushing and pulling people to go in certain directions. And then that sort of implies, well, if people truly have agency, then they ought to be able to go against the will of Ka, despite the fact that the book repeatedly shows us that Ka just kind of does whatever it wants. And Roland certainly seems to feel like he just has to do what Ka dictates. Seems to. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if, I sort of have thought for some time, like the reason why sort of things seem to work out for Roland, although not necessarily the people around him, is that he seems to make himself a willing tool of Ka. And so Ka uses him. I mean, meta level, Ka is Stephen King writing a story. And to the degree to which the protagonist makes himself a tool of the storyteller, Ka is able to work its will,
Yeah, I mean, because that's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if we really get metatextual with this thing, I think it opens up a lot of very interesting avenues for us. Because if Ka is the story, then, we talk about agency in stories all the time. We talk about a character's agency to make choice A or choice B. And a good story will present those options and define a character in a way in which their choices make sense. Why did character make choice A instead of choice B? Well, we've defined that. It makes sense. But at the end of the day, the actual character has very little agency in whether or not that choice is made. He makes that choice because the author wrote that choice down. And King has, part of my King reread had me just go through the short story collection, Nightmares and Dreamscapes. And there's a story in there in which King writes a short story about an author who decides he wants to live in the world he's created for his character, and he just like swaps him. He just goes into the world and tells the protagonist of the world, it's like, sorry, you have to go away now. And he's writing for him, and the choices that the character is making seem obvious at the time. Like, of course, that's the right choice, because I'm me making it. But that is one of the things that fascinates me about this, because how much does King want us to be taking this to the metatextual level? I'm not sure. Does he want us to be thinking about that fact in particular? What is Ka? Ka is the story. What is a Ka-tet? It is a group of characters that have been bound together by the story. The story has decided that these 5 main characters are going to hang out together, and they're going to understand each other, and they're going to stay with each other no matter what, because that's what we need for the story to work.
Right. Yeah. I think maybe you could even take it marginally more meta than that and say, like, well, I've talked about this before, like one of the longer things that I've ever written that ended up being book length, like toward the end of it, I was heading toward the ending that I had planned in my mind the whole time. And when I got to like the scene where the character makes a choice, I was just like, he just wouldn't make that choice. He's grown beyond that choice. He in this situation, there's just no way. And like it was that thing that sometimes you hear writers talk about, where like the character seemed to make the choice on his own, and I was just writing it down and dictating it. And that's the only time that's ever happened to me, and that was kind of awesome. But in a sense, on the meta level, it's like Ka, the writer has a plan for the plot. Ka's plan is to get Roland to the Dark Tower.
Yeah.
But are Roland and Jake and Eddie and Susanna going to play along with that plot? And the answer might be no, and the author might be surprised.
Sure. Yeah. That's fun.
Cool.
Sure, we'll have much more to say about Ka as we go through the series.
Yeah.
I do think it's like the linchpin of this entire thing about like our growing understanding of what this thing is. It's a fascinating thing to talk about, and I love that we get to continue to talk about it.
Yeah, right. It's a fun thing where he's introduced this thing and then continually sort of poked us to be like, no, it doesn't quite work like you were assuming. Nope, here's some more detail. No, here I'm going to contradict that. It's constantly refusing to let us just understand and put it behind us.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Matt, the final question of the evening. This was asked by, let me check my notes here, literally everybody. Everybody asked this question. They asked the question, which book will you be covering next? They asked this question because in 2012, Stephen King wrote a book called The Wind Through the Keyhole, and this book technically takes place after the end of Wizard and Glass, but before the beginning of Wolves of the Calla. And King has technically said it's basically book 4.5. In fact, if you buy their newly published box set that they released about the time the Dark Tower movie came out, they actually put this book after Wizard and Glass, and so people wanted to know, which one are we covering? And everybody forgot that I work so hard on my pretty schedule that I link in every episode of the show, and all they had to do was go click on that thing and they would know exactly which book we're covering next.
Clicking.
I think to be much more charitable to our wonderful listeners, I think what they actually probably wanted to know is, why are you not covering Wind Through the Keyhole next? Which is book 4.5 as stated by Cy King himself. I thought long and hard about this, and I asked many of my Dark Tower friends, and it was basically, I am of the opinion, just like with all the extra material, the stand, and all that kind of stuff, I am of the opinion that the books should be read the first time in the order they were published. Now, if you want to insert Wind Through the Keyhole after Wizards and Glass, after you've read them the first time, fine. But you cannot make the argument that The Wind Through the Keyhole is essential reading to understand the story of the Dark Tower, because it did not exist when the Dark Tower finished. So it is not essential reading. Like, you can read the final 3 books of the series without reading The Wind Through the Keyhole, and you will understand everything you need to understand about the story and where it ends, because it wasn't written yet, right? That being said, we are absolutely going to cover The Wind Through the Keyhole. We are just going to do it after we finish the series. We're going to go back and have one final chat with our quartet a little bit here. And we also going to cover The Little Sisters of Eluria, which is a short story that stars Roland, and he is telling a story of his past again. So we're going to cover both of those stories. Absolutely. We're going to do it. We're just not doing it until we finish with The Dark Tower. And by that, I mean Book 7, The Dark Tower, not the Dark Tower series, Book 7 called The Dark Tower. And if you're ever curious, I'm going to say this again, what book we're covering next, which parts of the book are we covering on the next episode, I have created a full schedule. It is there for every single week in this thing, all the way up to episode 67, our finale, which is going to happen on April 22nd, 2021, if you were curious. It's all there. So you can check that out, that we link that in the show notes of every single one of these episodes. So check it out. But yes, we are moving right along to Book 5, Wolves of the Calla. We'll be covering that next.
Awesome.
So
it's a very pretty schedule, folks. Go check it out.
I color coded it.
It's really quite nice.
I color coded. I worked so hard on it, and we haven't had to change it at all. That's the cool thing, is we've hit every one of these dates, Matt.
Because we don't take vacations.
Look at this. See, August 6th, Wizard and Glass overall discussion.
Yeah. You know,
boom.
Also, like any of the weeks where I might have normally taken a vacation, well, the world moved on, and so there's nothing else to do other than
we don't
podcast.
Travel anymore.
Yeah.
Although we do have an episode coming out on Christmas Eve, so we might
shift that around.
Might change a little bit. Anyway, we will be moving on to the Wolves of the Calla. In fact, we're done with this show, and so next week we will be starting that book. And we will be reading the prologue all the way up through chapter 3 of part 1. Part 1 of that book is called Roont, and we're going to be reading the prologue and the first 3 chapters. Remember, if you just like zoned out for a minute and totally forgot, it is in that schedule. Go click on the link in the show notes, and it'll take you to the schedule, and you'll be able to see episode 31, Wolves of the Calla, prologue, part 1 through Roont, chapter 3.
All right.
Part 1, Roont, chapter 3. Boom, right there.
Awesome.
And you can actually go to page count breakdown. It's on the next tab over, and you can see all the individual chapters.
It's really a very nice spreadsheet, Scott. We're all very proud of you.
I just want credit.
Everyone, please email Scott and tell him how nice the spreadsheet is. Anyway.
Oh, we got so many emails about it. I love you all. You're wonderful. We just got like 30 emails.
It's okay. It's because they just really want to know, and maybe they didn't trust the spreadsheet. But everyone, you can trust the spreadsheet.
You can trust the spreadsheet.
All right. Remember, of course, if you have any questions or you want to tell Scott how nice the spreadsheet is, you can reach out to us at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or on Twitter at kingslingerspod. Or you could just like create a whole thread about this on reddit.com/r/doofmedia.
Yeah, we've been having some people just dropping by onto our Reddit, and like one person has been sharing some amazing Dark Tower themed t-shirts they've been getting. They're so cool, and I want them all, but I can't afford to be buying a bunch of t-shirts right now, but I want literally all of them. Matt, there's one that says "Hey Jude" on it, and it's the Abbey Road like crosswalk, but instead of the Beatles, it's the quartet. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen, and I want it so bad.
That's great. I'm looking at this hat, the Nazalakola hat. That's so cool. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
These are fun.
It's all great. It's all great. So thank you for those of you that are just dropping by on the subreddit just to say hey and share stuff. We really appreciate that too. It's a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And if you are not already subscribed to Kingslingers, do it. We're 4 books in. There's no excuse to not be subscribed anymore. If you're listening to this right now, it basically means you're in for the long haul, and you should be subscribed. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
Yep. And if you like this show and you want to support it, consider donating to our Patreon account at patreon.com/doofmedia. We've got some new patrons to thank this week. Thank you to New Bidoofs, Nicholas W., Michael P., Ben H., Aaron, and Wafo, and new Doof Dancers, Michael B. and Wolf D. Welcome to the community, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you everyone for becoming a part of this thing, and we will have some cool bonus stuff coming. Some King theme bonus stuff. We got that Stand By Me. We're gonna do it, Matt. We're gonna do it. We're gonna watch Stand By Me next month. Let's say it now, and then we have to do it.
Okay, it is said.
Okay, we said it. Of course, if you cannot afford to donate to us right now, that is absolutely okay. As always, you can just help us out by sharing the podcast, by rating and reviewing it, by doing all these things that are absolutely free to do. You help us out just as much. And we thank all of you that did that. Especially we thank this week's Spotlight reviewer, Knock RN, who gives us 5 stars and says, "It was Ka." Amazing podcast. I'm reading the series for the first time and found the show when I was halfway through The Wastelands, and it was covering what I had just read. I'm now on Wolves, but it's so amazing to be able to go through the series for the first time and have this amazing show to listen to every week. Matt and Scott, you guys really kill it. Thank you for the content. It's for real. It's a treat. Well, thank you, Knock. We really appreciate that. I'm jealous that this was written a bit ago, so you're probably already like on the Dark Tower itself. So I hope you're enjoying the series still.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone else who has taken the time to rate and review us. That is it for us this week. This episode went on like way longer than I thought it would. I can't believe it. Wow. Well, I guess we had more questions than I thought.
That's what happens anytime we tell ourselves this will just be a nice, relaxed episode.
Yeah, this is going to be a short one. Nice, relaxed episode. Nope, 2 hours and 15 minutes. All right, folks, we'll see you all next week when we are beginning Wolves of the Calla, prologue through Chapter 3 of Part 1, Roont. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.
I feel wrong every time I say the word Calla, and I'm still not even convinced that's the right way to pronounce it. I think it's probably Calla, actually. Calla. I think it's Calla. I'm going to get an email about this. Fuck.